Good morning or afternoon, everyone. My name is Sierra Johnson. I'm the Senior Education Coordinator at the VPPPA National Office, and I want to thank you all for joining us for today's webinar, How Workforce Wearable Tech Provides EHS Leading Indicators that are Reducing Incidents and Claims. Just some quick housekeeping items before we get started. We'll have some time at the end of today's presentation for some questions. So if during the presentation you think of a question, please feel free to type that into the chat, accessible on the right side of your screen. Sorry, a little tongue-tied today. But we will answer as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. Your speakers today will be Tom West, the VP of Marketing with MakeYouSafe, Paul Abrams, Senior Vice President of Enterprise Health and Safety with NFI Industries, and Stephen Schaefer, Senior Risk Improvement Innovation Specialist with EMC Insurance Companies. Together, our panel will cover wearable tech's impact on EHS from all angles, from product use cases to long and short-term benefits for your site. And with that, I will turn things over to Tom.
Thanks very much, Sierra. I'm really grateful to be joined by both Stephen and Paul to talk a little bit today about how wearable technology is being used to increase the effectiveness and efficiency of safety programs, a little bit about how wearables can be looked to provide leading indicator data that can be useful, and what we're all here for, really, to send people home safely, reduce incidents, and improve or reduce work comp claims. So Paul and Stephen, thanks very much for being here. I'll come back to you in just a bit, but I'm going to get things kicked off here at the very beginning. I want to give you a little bit of insight into what we've been doing here at MakeYouSafe, talk generally about wearables and some considerations if you're evaluating wearable technology or looking at how that may fit for you, give you some examples of use cases that over the last 6 years here at MakeYouSafe we've experienced in the field in industrial organizations. And, I don't intend at all for this to be a sales pitch, but I want to give you a look at how our technology as an example works. And there are some differentiators or some key things you may be looking at as well in that area. But I wanted to get started with this. This really is the reason why we're all here. It's central to what all of you do as safety professionals. And it may be of interest to you to see this presented this way, but it still is shocking and staggering to me that every day around the world, on average, more than 1,000 people go to their jobs and don't go home to their families due to workplace fatalities. That just blows me away. And 5,000 people globally pass away every day from work-related illnesses. Here in the United States alone, U.S. workers' compensation payouts top $63 billion a year. And if you start to do the math there, that's way more than $1 billion a week. So our mission, really the founding principle that led to the creation of MakeYouSafe was the question: can we begin to use technology to begin to predict risk and hazards the way that we predict weather, and use this leading indicator data to keep these kinds of things from happening? I'd like to introduce you here to, this is our CEO, my good friend, Gabriel Glynn. We're fortunate to be recognized here at MakeYouSafe, both by industry as well as by workers' comp insurance entities, carriers and agents and brokers. Maybe one of the benefits of being located here in Des Moines, Iowa. We're the number 1 or number 2 insurance hub in the country, depending on who you talk to. But we're also, per capita, I think we have more manufacturing organizations here than any other state in the country, something like 6,000. So Gabe and I routinely speak about the concept that we're building here at MakeYouSafe. And you might think of wearable technology the way that we do, that wearables could be the future evolution of PPE, might be the most important piece of PPE that people wear. It might just become a ubiquitous part of safety management. And now this idea of the connected worker and integrating them via technology into the things around them is becoming more and more prevalent. So this is a terrific article, by the way, that you can find on our website if you may be interested, but we're very fortunate that we're being perceived, even after only 6 years in existence, as a leader in the space, both safety and advanced manufacturing operations. But I'd like to get to this. The basic premise behind what we're doing, or behind this concept of using technology, wearables in your safety program, is this idea that in every facility, in every job site, construction job site, in every building, there are risks that people face in doing their jobs. And if we're able to understand the clues of where those risks and hazards are present, those clues may begin to reveal patterns and trends proactively that we can then take action on before incidents occur. So that's the basic concept sort of behind what we're doing. Why should you care? That's pretty blunt, but I like to put that right up front. Well, we're now seeing benefits being realized. And I can tell you, being part of the company now for, I don't know, about 5 years or so, in the early days, this was a concept. It was an idea. And it was prototyped then, and we started to do pilots and started to get some data. And now we're in the marketplace, and we have customers across North America. We're starting to actually see the impact that our technology, our solution is making. I often kind of draw the analogy to technology that's being used in automobiles, which is referred to as telematics, to ensure safe driving habits. 5 or so years ago, that was brand new, but now it's become something that is offered in the marketplace pretty routinely by multiple companies. We may be the same kind of thing for worker safety. And what we're seeing here is, first and foremost, evidence that claims frequency and claims severity can be dramatically impacted. In some accounts, some clients, we're seeing things as high as a 50% reduction in the frequency of claims and up to a 90% reduction in severity of claims. This technology is now being used to automatically detect in real time the potential for hazard and risks to exist. So that can be game changing to a safety management team that wants to be proactive and preventative in nature. We're seeing increased involvement, transparency, and communication improvement, barriers being broken down between the frontline workers and their leadership teams, which, as Sierra pointed out a few minutes ago, is a core component of effective safety and health management programs. And we'll talk a little bit more about how we do that, the importance of good catches and near misses, and how that can be done in a culture building instead of culture damaging way. With data being amassed, we have the opportunity now to uncover things that were unknown, maybe not even thought about, see areas of our operation where we hadn't considered that the potential risk existed. And we're doing some things for a safety and health management program, like simplifying documentation, trying to make the life of a safety leader easier. All what you do is harder than what I do probably on a daily basis. All of the things that you do are really impactful to us as we build our solution and try to make life easier for you. And we'll talk about this idea, the requirement of an effective safety and health management system. and how we can contribute to that. So that's the payoff right up front. That's what we're talking about here. Now, let me give you an example of how this can work, and I'm going to use our solution as a model here. And if I can paint a picture in your mind, envision your workers coming into your facility at the beginning of their day or beginning of their shift, and they walk up to a wall-mounted kiosk. We call that our base station. It's got a keypad on it. They simply enter a unique identifier that could be their employee ID number, and one of the 20 bays in this base station will flash green. They remove the core wearable device from that bay, as you see Mike doing here, actually, in the photo, and insert that into an armband worn holster where it snaps and locks securely. The holster is Velcro and elastic. It's comfortable to wear. If they wear out, they can be thrown away, but the electronics are checked out and returned to this kiosk at the beginning and the end of every shift. I'm going to try to hold one up to the camera here just so you can see that that small core wearable device is about the size of my thumb, maybe the size of a common matchbox. One of the considerations is that any solution you may be evaluating really needs to be scalable. I love this photo. This is one of the first large scale deployments that we did within a customer organization. You can see all those kiosks are sort of daisy chained together. We did this at multiple entry and exit points, and workers who come in don't have to wait in a line. In fact, in this case, they scan a card, a badge, and don't even have to use the keypad. They check out their PPE and go about their day, go about their job. But now we've got this wearable device on the arm of the now connected worker, and they really don't have to choose to interact with it at all if they don't want to. They can simply go about their work. That device begins collecting data about the environment around them and about what they're experiencing and sending it in real time back to that kiosk, which is connected to the internet. And now we can send that data, raw data, to our cloud platform where we use artificial intelligence and machine learning to provide actionable intelligence and analytics to a safety leader in an application that we call Make You Smart. And it takes about 30 seconds really for something that the wearable device detects to show up in the Make You Smart app on any device. So even a frontline safety leader who's walking around the facility floor with a smartphone has access to this intelligence. So you're probably asking yourself, all right, exactly what kind of data are we talking about here? How creepy might this be? This is a close-up view of our wearable device in its armband holster. And you can see that lots of the IoT-enabled sensors are labeled here. I kind of like to talk about this in terms of the 4 categories or types of data that we're collecting, though. And we'll do that throughout. So first would be data about ever-changing environmental conditions around the worker. In a lot of environments we end up in, and you all may know this better than I do, you know, you can be 20 feet away from another worker and the environmental impact that you may be experiencing may be dramatically different. I might be receiving a lot of noise and sound dosage, and somebody on the other side of the machine might be receiving really poor air quality. We're monitoring those kinds of things here using these sensors. We're monitoring temperature and humidity. And you all know that from those things, we can give a heat index calculation. Now, that is personal from the arm of every individual worker. We're monitoring things here like low light and no light levels. So those typical industrial hygiene type concerns, those things that many organizations have to conduct audits periodically, probably not often enough about, we're now monitoring in real time and gathering an awful lot of data that is available to you on demand. Second here would be data about potentially hazardous human motion. And I'd like you to think about this in two ways. First are the things that might require immediate attention. This is where we started. Can we use the accelerometer in the device to determine when a slip occurs? And does that look different from a trip or a fall? By the way, the answer is yes. They're dramatically different motions. And when something exceeds a certain force threshold, we gather up a little bit of motion data, we send that to our cloud platform, and what we're doing with machine learning is really asking it, can we categorize or classify what's happened here? In the case where we know this is 85% certain that this is a slip, we return that answer to the safety leader. In the case where we can identify that this was repetitive motion, we classify it that way. We're looking for things like, pushing and pulling and lifting and turning and exertion and strain type concerns. Even if we can't classify what they are, we still label them as an unidentified high force motion. And here's the second classification. When we begin to amass that data, even over short periods of time, a couple of weeks, a month, we begin to get a profile of worker physicality. And that's sort of a proprietary metric that we use, but we're really looking at the effort that is exerted in doing work over time. And that leads us to some pretty exciting things. We can then look at why certain workers seem to be exerting more physicality than other workers do. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well. Third would be this understanding and awareness of the space around a worker. When we detect any of those indicators that we've been discussing, that's what we call them, we identify the location of where those things are happening. And you could think of this as dropping a pin on a map. In this case, we overlay it onto a facility floor plan. So we can begin to see work areas and zones and stations where people are experiencing things. At the start of the pandemic, we also realized that we could detect when two wearable devices, and that means two workers, were in close proximity to one another. And that certainly became very useful for on-demand contact tracing. It may continue to be useful in the future as we figure out how to deal with these, contagions. And further, we're also able to see the proximity of workers to other connected things. Connected factory pieces of equipment and systems. And for some of our customers who are on this digital transformation journey, we're now able to weave the connected worker into the environment that they're working in and see what they're engaged with, what pieces of equipment they're using. And that opens the door really to a lot of possibilities about how to keep the worker safe, how they're impacting productivity, and other things that I'll give you a couple of examples of as we go forward. Fourth, certainly not least, though, is this voice recorded capability, voice recorded message capability. There's a button in the middle of the device that allows a worker to push to talk. They have to do it intentionally. The button has to be held down, but then they can speak into the device. And our intention really was to increase the number of near misses that get communicated from the front lines. Good catches, close calls, whatever you call them, they're important. And what we're seeing is that with safety leaders positively reinforcing that behavior, they start to really get a dramatically increased volume of these frontline observations. See something, say something. And they may be safety related, but even equally exciting are things that are quality or production related, process improvement suggestions. So that's a bit about what we're doing on our piece of technology, our wearable device. Almost in the same breath here, I like to point out what we're not doing. what you don't see here. So you don't see any sensors that are looking inward at the individual. We're not collecting anything that's personal or biometric or HIPAA covered. That goes a long way, I think, in overcoming that perception or that resistance that this is about tracking the worker. It's not. It's about tracking their experiences and what they're being exposed to. You could think of this as an advocate that is looking outward in the hope to keep the worker safe. To that end, we're also not continuously tracking people. There's no button I can push to find out exactly where someone is right now. We don't care how long they've been in the break room or how many times they visited the restroom today. If they slip in there, that's the kind of indicator that is detected and captured. We're also strategically not delivering any feedback immediately to the worker. There are no buzzers or bells or whistles that are going to go off. Constantly reminding somebody that they may be doing something wrong or they need to change their behavior when they may not be the problem at all is an awful lot of responsibility to put on the worker. I think personally, it probably becomes a nuisance and people don't want to wear it then. And in addition, there are some environments where, that kind of vibrating on your arm might cause more of a hazard, more of a risk. Excuse me. So the other half of our solution is this software platform that is cloud-based. We call this Make You Smart. I know that this is just a static view, but our solution here in the cloud is really a very robust one. And if there's anything that you notice, even on just this image, hopefully it is that things are grouped together and there are big numbers and there's a lot of color coding that's going on here. So what we're showing really is the latest motion indicators that have come up, slips and trips and falls since the last time I looked at my app. Those may be a high priority that I want to take action on immediately. We're also showing environmental indicators. In this case, it's really, really small, but there's a high number of high heat indicators here, 200. Well, if it's July and I've got the overhead doors open on my loading dock, I probably know those things are going to happen. They may not be a high priority for me because I've already established a break schedule and hydration station, so I can snooze those. We also see the latest voice memos that have come in, and we've got some tools here that are just really the tip of the iceberg, but the ability to turn any indicator that is deemed important into a hazard so that we can begin to track it through our safety management process is really just the start of what we're doing here. We're enabling safety leaders to hopefully live in this platform and find it easier to do their job and take action on these leading indicator data points. So without further ado, let's dive into some examples of the kind of things that we're seeing on the front lines that are representative of what we're doing here and how this could be applied. We see an awful lot of high sound, high noise dosage types of alerts. In some cases, we're seeing examples that a safety leader was alerted, took action, and found that the frontline worker wasn't wearing the required hearing protection. In a lot of cases, we're seeing that they are wearing the right hearing protection, but the noise dosage that they're experiencing might be an entire day's allowance within the first couple of hours because of the type of equipment that they're using. That might be reason for reevaluating the kind of hearing protection that they're wearing. And another example, which still is surprising but not unexpected to me, is we've even seen examples of secondhand sound dosage. Workers working with some machinery or equipment were doing all the right things, but nobody had considered the other team of workers that's working in close proximity to them. So it's this kind of alert, this kind of data that may be valuable and may be a priority for safety leaders to take action on, even if it's showing up and just thanking people for doing the right thing. Here's another example, a motion example. I love to tell this story, but we were at work in a globally recognized name, a manufacturer of consumer product goods in an old factory. Many workers doing similar work on close workstations, all that involved, a lot of twisting and turning and a lot of movement. And while all of them were wearing our technology, one of them in particular kept exhibiting a high force motion indicator that we couldn't classify. So when we asked about it, the safety leadership team said, "Oh, that's just Victor. Victor's been here for an awful long time. He's kind of herky jerky. He does things his own way, but great guy, great employee, highly productive." And the next time we were there, we said to the safety team, "Can we observe Victor? We would like to know what we're detecting. That helps us get better." And when we did, first of all, Victor was blown away that anybody cared enough to ask what he was experiencing. And secondly, he suggested that he had a really good explanation for what we were picking up. He went on to say that, "I haven't told anybody on the safety team this, but I got a really nagging shoulder injury. It's starting to give me starting to give me a lot of trouble." And when we said, "Well, that's interesting, Victor. Why does it look more dramatic on Wednesday and Thursday and Friday than it does on Monday and Tuesday?" He said, "Oh, I got an explanation for that too. Usually on the weekend, I go to a chiropractor. So beginning of the week, I'm feeling pretty good. By the end of the week, it's really starting to hurt me." We walked away from that conversation with a global director of health and safety saying, "We've seen this before and we're self-insured." And usually this kind of injury that builds over time costs us in excess of $170,000. So just knowing about it really helps us dodge a bullet. That led us on this journey to a recent example. We were deployed with a Fortune 100 company that has facilities throughout the world, really, but around the country. And we were in 4 of those facilities simultaneously. The buildings are laid out the same. They do exactly the same work. The machines and the processes that they use are exactly the same. And after 60 days, it was quite interesting for us to discover that one site out of 4 was working 750% more physically in a couple of job roles than the other 3 sites were. Now that begs some questions, doesn't it? What are they doing differently? Are these people just working harder? Are the other people not working as hard? Are there improvements that can be made to their surroundings, their process that would keep them from working as hard? And the answer really was all of those things were done and investigated by the safety team. But that really put us on this path to thinking about how we can visualize overall worker physicality a little bit easier, and how we can then enable comparisons for people doing similar jobs. Who bubbles to the top in terms of worker physicality, the effort that they're putting forward? And this, type of musculoskeletal concern, this cumulative trauma, strain, and exertion concern, certainly exists in a lot of industries, but material handling roles are ideally suited for this kind of approach. So I mentioned earlier voice recorded near misses and good catches. And I'll take it aside for just a moment. I've often heard it referred to as maybe the holy grail of keeping people safe. The idea that we want more of these near miss reports. Yet, every time I ask, organizations aren't getting as many of these things as we would like, or as we really believe are happening on the front lines. And, there's probably a lot of explanations, but a simple one is nobody really wants to go fill out paperwork, sometimes walking to the next building to report something that didn't even really happen. So we enabled this ability for a worker to push a button, speak into the device without stopping their productivity, without leaving what they're doing, and report things that immediately show up in the safety leader's dashboard. This is what a voice memo looks like when it comes in. There's a summary, but you also get the playable audio file as well as a voice to text transcription. And we hear things all the time now, like I'm in a dark corner of the warehouse and somebody dropped a pallet in a walkway, or machine number 3 on the line has a drain pan that's about to overflow. Sometimes some startling things like I was almost struck by a sharp object in the assembly room. Those kinds of voice memos with just a little bit of positive behavioral reinforcement by the leadership team, you start to get a flood of these, and they're incredibly valuable. Here's a terrific example. Right after orientation, I believe, or shortly thereafter, a worker went back to their workstation, pushed the button and said, I think this is supposed to be how it works. I've been meaning to tell somebody for a long time. There's an intermittent short in this piece of equipment that I used. And this was a new pilot, a new project. The safety leader went and took a look immediately. What he found was that this was an electrical shock hazard. And in this case, an insurance carrier was involved as well. Their loss control reps want to be able to help their policyholders. In this case, they did a little bit of looking. And not only did they write the workers' comp, but they also covered the property insurance and found that this could have been a building fire hazard or an equipment fire hazard. So what's the value of a voice message that only lasts for a few seconds? Well, here's a really good example of how that could be hundreds of thousands, if not, even more expensive. Another example from the construction world. We're at work on a lot of large construction sites. We've had actually examples of falls from height. Not that our data would have prevented that. And in these cases, workers were wearing, their proper harness and tether. But in one case in particular, somebody was sliding off a roof and sliding so slow that the tether wasn't catching. So they used the voice memo feature to let somebody know that that was happening to them, and they got responded to right away. In another case, somebody was suspended, and I think it's referred to as suspension trauma, but they were able to leave a voice memo that went directly to safety leaders, letting them know that they needed some help in getting down. And we're really not trying to be a life-saving device, but more of a diagnostic tool. On the other hand, we're proud that some examples where this really has worked out quite well for workers and for safety leaders. Here's another example. This was in food processing and food packaging. The simplest of voice memos was left for a safety leader. A team leader pushed the button and reported to their supervisory team. I've been meaning to tell somebody for a long time. You'd be surprised how many of them start that way. But everybody in our department seems to have a bruise in exactly the same place. Can we get some cushion and, some padding around this piece of equipment? That safety leader was a rock star. Went there, got them padding and cushioning, but started to ask some questions about how they were doing things. And that stand-up meeting really resulted in some suggestions about how they could re-engineer the process so that they could engineer that movement, that motion that was causing bruises out of the process, and instead started thinking about efficiency and savings. So a couple of other notes here. One about the versatility of a solution, and a couple of further mentions about advanced manufacturing environments or Industry 4.0 type connected worker solutions. From the very beginning, the heart of what we're doing, which is our cloud software platform, was designed with the intention of not just taking in data from our wearable device, but also connecting to other things. In this case, that might be third-party building sensors, connected pieces of machinery or equipment, and exchanging that data with the other systems that exist in this complex business environment that we're all living in today. Further, we've got sophisticated AI and machine learning models that really can be put to work not just on data that we're gathering, but also might find context in data from other things. A good example of that is one of the things we can't do on the device just yet today is particulates. I mentioned air quality, but we're monitoring gases. So a lot of organizations have a wall-mounted sensor to monitor particulates in certain departments. We could take in that data and use it in our platform to provide more understanding and insight and optics into what workers are experiencing. This idea of proximity really make you safe. We call that range view technology. And if you love the photo here like I do, not only can we now get an understanding of what's happening around an individual worker in the middle of your screen there, we can also begin to see when two workers are in close proximity to one another. I mentioned contact tracing earlier, right? We can pull a report that shows who has spent more than 15 minutes in close proximity with a worker over the last 48 hours, or however the variables decide to change. We're ready for that. There also might be additional implications here, like are these two workers more productive than maybe other groups of 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 workers? Maybe we just leave these guys alone because they work extremely well together. And we're also able to see worker proximity to other things. The example here is a fork truck, right? If we have an IoT enabled powered industrial truck, if somebody's certification isn't up to date, maybe we don't enable them to turn it on. So those kinds of possibilities become interesting to think about depending on the objectives of a customer. We have technology now on the arm of the worker that really can do an awful lot that didn't exist before. And we begin to get this understanding now, not just from a safety perspective, but from an operational production efficiency quality perspective, a holistic view of what's happening within the organization. And for some of our clients, that's incredibly important. I'll give you this final use case example here. This is an actual photo from a facility floor. This happens to be in the food industry. It's grayed out to protect the innocent, but what you probably notice here is that everything is really cramped tight together. These are all production lines, and like in a lot of environments, these workers are constantly pulled from one line to another. So seeing which line they're on, and even just knowing where people are right now, gives this leadership team a significant advantage. They know who's there, where they're working, but they also begin to see how they're interacting on this line. Even the potential for adapting production speeds to the workers who are there becomes possible. And if there's one bullet point I would have you pay attention to, it may be the smallest one or the last one there. This organization has really been monitoring what they've invested and the time that they're putting forward in this project. And what they're seeing is the promise for a 50 to 60x return on their investment and improvements in efficiency as well. So earlier I was referring to the safety management process, right? Central to what safety professionals do is hazard identification, conducting some analysis and understanding what's happening, and then engineering and implementing controls, and that closed loop, evaluating results over time so that we can make sure that desired results have been achieved. Well, follow the logic here. If we're using technology to automatically detect leading indicators of potential hazards, we make that hazard identification easier. And if we've got all the data in a place that allows for thorough analysis and documentation of what controls are being implemented, what steps are being taken, so that it can be reflected upon and outcomes can be viewed, then that becomes really powerful. This can be an important part of an effective safety and health management system. As a matter of fact, if you couple this with the concept of, voice memos, frontline observations being reported, that really leads to a higher degree of participation, worker engagement, and an improved culture, which is really what we're all after. But this may help meet safety certification requirements. And if you add to that the newly released feature that we're awfully excited to be talking about these days, now we're not just focused on fixed workplaces where workers come into the facility and stay there all day, but those remote and field workers, route drivers, people who are working outside of the facility, we now have the ability to pair a wearable piece of technology with their company issued mobile device so that we can send data through that mobile device, and it again shows up in real time. And this time location can be GPS enriched based on their mobile device. So for safety leaders, that may be game changing. So with that said, I'm going to stop my slide presentation here, and I'm happy to reintroduce Stephen and Paul, and we're going to have a bit of a discussion about wearable technology. Stephen, can I ask you to go first? Can you introduce yourself and maybe talk about your role and responsibilities there, and give a bit of a profile about EMC?
Sure. So my name is Stephen Schaefer. I work for EMC Insurance Companies. We're a mid-sized insurer. We're located in Des Moines, Iowa. I work in our risk improvement area. Specifically, I am part of our innovation team. So I work on obviously wearable devices, building sensors, blockchain, drones. We do a whole lot of different things. So I've just been involved in that for probably about the last 3 years. I've been at EMC for about 17 years.
And we're awfully happy to be working closely with you. EMC is involved in Make You Safe now for a few years, but we're also working with some of your policyholders, and we engage with you quite regularly. Thanks for that. Paul, can I give you an opportunity to introduce yourself?
Sure,
talk a little bit about your company and what your role and responsibilities are there.
Yep. Tom, thank you for inviting me. Sarah, thank you for coordinating. Stephen, nice to meet you. My name is Paul Abrams. I'm the Senior Vice President of Enterprise Health and Safety for NFI. NFI is a North American-based trucking, warehousing, third-party logistics, port services provider. We have about 16,000 employees in the United States and Canada. My team is responsible for employee health and safety, and also regulatory compliance for OSHA and Department of Transportation.
Good deal. Thanks very much. So let's get started this way. Each of you, from your perspective, what do you see as the promise that technology like this, wearables in particular, hold for, from your perspective, Stephen, as an insurer? But let's start with Paul from a safety leader's perspective.
Sure. Yep. So from our perspective, we're looking for ways to fuse innovation into our safety management system. And today, we have 90 of our leaders in our corporate office here in New Jersey. And during one of my peers' presentations, we actually just took one of our VPs of safety, and he's focusing on innovation and safety technology. He was talking about how can we partner with our engineering team and look for technologies that not only are safe, but help us work smarter. So from our perspective, it ties very closely with our values. It ties very closely with our strategic roadmap. And we believe it's the way for us to continue to allow our employees to be as safe as possible.
Well said. Stephen, from the perspective of a work comp insurer?
Well, let me grab onto this comment about that Paul made about working smarter. I think that's really what wearables are going to allow us to do. And from a safety professional's point of view or a risk improvement person's point of view, it's going to let me work smarter because now I can take this really big problem that I really don't have a lot of vision on, or my vision is like one day or one time I went out and worked at one guy for 5 minutes to now I have vision 8 hours a day on everyone. And so now I can use a computer an AI, or whatever, however you want to look at it, this cloud system to start looking at that data and start telling me what are the important things. So now I can start to focus in on the most important things. And now I'm not trying to guess. I know these people are doing a heavy lift. Is that something I should be worried about? Because I've done all my lift training and everything else. Now I have some data to back up that you're right, I do. So let's go do it again. Or maybe I don't need to. Or like you talked about with Victor, why is Victor doing it different when everybody else is doing it in a safe way? So I think the ability to focus in and kind of clear out some of the noise and get better visibility on safety is really where wearables are going to provide us the greatest bang for the buck.
I think one of the important learnings for us early on was just the idea, the education from EMC and from Stephen and his team, that they really are there. They have assets and resources that they want to deploy to solve problems, to help policyholders. Stephen, you want to speak to that?
Well, right. So we have all kinds of assets. We have dedicated safety professionals to our insureds, but it can be difficult for them to focus in on what they need to be looking at when they go to a policyholder. And I would much rather have my risk improvement person spend 15, 20 minutes with Make You Smart to be able, before they go on to a policyholder's location, and be able to walk directly to the employee that they feel that they need to spend some time with because they're seeing maybe some high exertions and they want to know what's going on. And we've seen some really great success with that. And it obviously saves us a lot of time. It makes us more effective.
What's the macro vision, do you think, for you and for EMC? You've made this comment, which I love, about, the insurance model, is probably changing, right? From repair and replace to, be willing to write a check to cover a loss, instead to engaging with policyholders to solve problems.
I mean, if I live in Nirvana, where I want to see the insurance model go from repair and replace to predict and prevent. Yeah. Because everybody wins if we can predict the hazards and prevent the accidents before they ever occur. Yeah. And so that's really what we'd like to see happen. And I think various sensor technologies, not just wearables, with building sensors, lots of different things, will help us get there. And I think that could be a real paradigm shift in insurance if we can move away from this repair and replace to a predict and prevent model. And I think everybody wants to get there, because if we do get to predict and prevent, then that means premiums go down across the board. And and I don't know about you, but I've yet to hear anyone who wants to pay more for the insurance. If you want to pay more for your insurance, that's great. Maybe we should talk. I don't know.
Yeah. And Paul, I know those P's resonate with you, right? Prevent.
They absolutely do.
Yeah, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So this side, above my shoulder, you see a diamond on my board, and that's what we call the 4 P's of safety. And Stephen and I did not rehearse this or script this out. So this is a great theme that I'm seeing. We talk constantly about being positive, about being proactive, about being preventative, and lastly, how can we be predictive? And we've found being predictive is the most challenging. And what Stephen was saying is really key, because we are very lucky where we have a very strong relationship, not only with our broker, but with our carriers. So we're having the exact same discussions with them. How can we utilize data, technology? From our perspective, we've infused behavioral-based safety as part of our entire safety process. So we look at it as how can we find an individual that has an opportunity for improvement, conduct a behavioral-based safety observation, and utilize that opportunity for coaching and feedback. So it's not punitive. And it really ties back to that picture, Tom, that you showed of the father and son on the beach. Why is safety important to you? Why do you want to get home? Why do we want you, as part of our NFI family, to be as safe as you can? Because you have things to do at home with the ones that you love. So it all ties together very, very nicely.
Yeah. Well, we're happy to be working with you and exploring how this solution might be implemented there. Maybe you can talk about that predictive, preventative data. What's your hope? What's highest priority for you?
Well, highest priority is that no one gets hurt and there's no accidents, right? That's the ultimate. I'll use Stephen's line, the nirvana. But as we're very closely aligned with our internal customers, our operations teams. So we work with the business intelligence individuals, and we're looking for ways that we can utilize this data and actually start to predict times of day, times of week, length of service, where people may be more likely to have an incident. So from our perspective, that's the initial goal that we're looking at. And any additional data that we can get just makes that easier.
So I bet some
Tom,
people.
can I comment on this data idea? I think we all have used data in the past. I mean, I work for an insurance company. Everybody looks at their claims data, right? And all of this is very lagging data, right?
Yes.
I mean, to where it can be, you'll have a claims review once a year, once a quarter, whatever it is. So you're talking weeks or months of lag time. And now with sensors, we can reduce that lag time to what? 15 minutes, an hour, a couple of hours. I think that's super powerful.
So let's get into that a little bit, right? You guys are both very familiar with the types of data that we happen to be gathering on our technology. Steven's got a background in industrial hygiene. Paul, you're very well suited to speak from an ergonomic point of view. That's a high concern for you. So maybe you guys can take turns. Steven, what's the leading indicator data from an industrial hygiene point of view that you see as highly valuable? How might it be used? What kind of thoughts do you have around that?
Well, I don't know about just leading indicator data, but the ability to iterate faster. Mm-hmm. So I have identified a problem. I've gone and I've made a change. And now I want to assess, did it do anything? Mm-hmm. I mean, let's take noise as an example, right? I know I have a noise problem. I decide I'm going to engineer that out, right? I'm going to do something to try to reduce that noise exposure. Prior, it was I had to call up an industrial hygienist, come in, do a noise survey. That took a day. They had to get those results back to me. How long is that going to take? You know that. And then I make my change. I have to wait to see if that's going to work. Probably have another noise survey done. Again, another day, another survey, another report. And so now I've waited, a couple of months, 3 months, 6 months before I knew if that engineering control actually did anything.
And it's expensive.
Now I have all of my workers. I have, it's not perfect data. It's not, the greatest, but I have a really good idea of what their noise exposure is every day. And I can see, did it make a significant impact or not? And I can iterate on that change, and I can do that faster. So now what used to take me months to do, I can do in weeks. Mm-hmm. I think that's very powerful.
And it provides focus. I know, Paul, you've said that very simply, right? Sometimes it's hard just to know where to start. I know I got a problem. I can try a lot of things.
Yep.
Maybe you can speak about that from a human movement point of view.
Yep. So we have great lagging indicators. We can, our loss runs come in, we can take a look, compare ourselves to million mile frequencies, to, looking at the BLS standards. We want to move past that. We want to get to the leading indicator. And I mentioned this briefly earlier, but having the ability to see an individual who may over time exhibit behaviors that could increase their risk of injury, we very quickly can see that alert. We very quickly can follow up with an observation. And we very quickly can follow up with some customized training that we partnered with our insurance carrier on for lifting philosophy. So from our perspective, it's a great segue to getting away from the lagging indicator and being way more real time, just like Steven said.
Yep. I can see Steven smiling because these are the stories he loves that bring a smile to his face. I'm glad I got the opportunity to introduce you guys to one another. So how about this? If, we've done an awful lot of thinking about this on our journey, right? How do we find a good fit in terms of maturity and readiness, an organization and a leadership team that can implement an innovative new technology and really yield value from it? Either of you want to take a stab first at that? What does it take to do this effectively?
You want to go first, Paul?
Yeah, I will, of course. So culturally, there has to be buy-in from the top and a willingness to understand that we need to think about things differently. As I mentioned earlier, today we have our whole management team in, first time in over 2.5 years. Safety always leads off after our CEO. And our CEO talked about being nimble, thinking about things differently. And his 3 S's, safety, security, and service. So when ownership is speaking the language that we speak in safety, definitely makes it much easier as an organization to think about things from an innovative standpoint. I also mentioned earlier, from an innovation standpoint, it's one of our strategic pillars. So our safety team and our engineering team is very aligned in looking at new technologies. And again, I feel like a broken record here, Tom, sorry, but let us be safe and smart, right? So when you live in an environment that embraces safety, safety is one of our 6 key values, core values. It's something that it's not just on a poster. It doesn't just circle on a TV screen. It's something that we live and breathe, and we walk the talk every day. My team has expanded by 5 brand new individuals. We're recruiting for 2. They're net new hires. So the more individuals that we can put out in the field that help support our customers, that can be there to assist, it makes the whole process that much easier. So for me, it really comes down to culture, and it comes down to an organization being willing to dive in head first and take full ownership and figure out the best way to implement.
Yep. And Stephen, this is a question that you've been focused on in close partnership with us, right? How do we deploy technology to an organization who's ready for it and can act on it? Any thoughts?
Well, that's you just hit on it. Act on it. I think that the key thing there is people have to have a willingness to take action. I mean, we can provide them with all the information. We can give them suggestions of things to do, but if they don't do anything, you don't get any change. Yeah. So I think with any technology, or not just wearables, but sensors in general, is that it's not a silver bullet. It's not going to solve all your problems, right? You have to understand what the problem is you're trying to solve, get the data, find a solution, and take action on it. If you're not in, like Paul said, it's a cultural thing. If you're not in that place where you can take the actions that need to be taken to resolve the issues, then it's not really going to help you, because you're just going to have all this data telling you all this stuff, and you're not going to do anything about it. Yep. So I don't know what value you get there.
You can have the greatest tool in the world, right? But if
Correct.
It sits in your toolbox, yep. Especially when the insurance company may have subsidized it and told you it was a good idea, it's not going to do anybody any good unless you use it.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, Tom, just to add on to that too, we utilize every day the prior day's status. So we're constantly reinforcing those safe behaviors in a very positive way to be proactive. And by keeping it front and center daily at the locations utilizing this, it becomes real. And then people start to get more comfortable and they understand the purpose much more.
Yeah. So every safety talk I've ever given in every safety council, safety conference I've ever been to, there's always mention of ROI, right? That ability for, or that need for safety leaders to have an understanding of how to calculate returns, savings, impact, and communicate that upward. Do you think this technology offers that ability? Maybe Paul, start with you.
Yeah, so I've said my whole career, I'm measured by the non-event, right? So when things don't happen, I'm doing something right. So, you know, we're early in the process. We are pleased to date with things we're learning. So my opinion is any data point in our world helps us to prove the ROI. So anytime I can get my hands on information, we can analyze it, I can get it into the hands of people way smarter than me, it's definitely a win.
Yeah. And Stephen, you know, working with an insurance company, I've learned an awful lot from you and your team and the insurance industry in general. But, you know, maybe you can speak to how work comp is, you know, calculated, right? Is there a potential for ROI there by making subtle changes on a daily basis?
Well, I think improving safety is good for everyone, not just, you know, not just the work comp carriers of the world, right? I mean, what we're trying to do is prevent injuries to our workers, right? And however we can do that, and if we are doing that, then that's a win. Now, on any particular technology, I mean, there's lots of different ways that you can do that. And I think Paul pointed out a couple of those.
Mm-hmm. Well, to interject though, you know, a lot of safety leaders I find when I talk about, you know, the fact that mod scores last for 4 years, right? It's a 3-year rolling average. And if your organization is looking to improve the bottom line, changes you make today actually can have an impact on, you know, the premiums that you pay long term. Yeah.
Long term, yeah, absolutely, they can.
Yep. From our perspective, I won't ask you to comment on this, but, use of a technology like ours, we hope one day provides evidence that a policyholder could point to with their insurer and say, here are the things that we're doing, and here's why we're deserving of, a better rate. So, yeah. Other comments you guys may have? I know we're getting close to the top of the hour. Sierra may have some questions in a moment too, but any final thoughts? Paul, start with you.
So culture, it's all about culture. If you live and breathe safety and you are legitimately committed to it, everything else becomes easy. So for all those out there, build that culture, make sure people understand the why of safety. And again, there's this balance between punitive and then the other end of the spectrum of being too polite in the approach. And what I talk to the team about all the time is be professional. As we go out, we want to be very clear. We have to give clarity of our vision, clarity of our expectation. And as I said, any data that we can gather from any type of source is a win.
If you don't mind me picking at that just a moment, right? I talk about culture a lot. I think that voice memo capability, the ability to hear the voice of the frontline worker can really contribute to culture. Any thoughts from you? I know you're just really getting started, but
there's definitely a benefit. And from what we've seen, individuals enjoy that capability. I've personally been at a handful of the rollouts because I think it's important to give the corporate stance. And once people understand that it's not a spy device, it's not recording, it's very clear when you push the button, it clicks, people use it. And I think that there's some value in that instant communication. And going back to the accident triangle over my shoulder, in addition to observations at the base, the collection of near misses or good catches is number 2 in order to get to that leading indicator world.
Yep. Gotcha. Stephen, any final thoughts, observations?
Identify the problem that you want to solve, and then find the technology that will help you solve that problem, and then implement it.
Yeah. Take action on it.
Take action. That's right.
Yep. Okay. So, Sierra, let me ask if there were any questions that were submitted.
Absolutely. We've had quite a few that are more or less along the lines of how user-friendly is it? Does it require any particular training for the employee to use? And then on the app side, how intuitive is that?
Yeah, well, I'll jump in first, but you guys can contribute too. You both have some experience here. I think we've gone to great lengths, extreme lengths, if you will, to try to make what we're doing as easy to implement as possible. So to that end, we work with a safety team, a leadership team, before we ever go out in the field and do an installation, just collecting details and being aware of their business, who's going to wear the device. When we finally get there to do an installation, which really just takes a couple of hours, we really attempt to do and Paul kind of alluded to this, right? When we do a deployment, we want the opportunity to tell the workers what we're doing, what it doesn't do. If we can stand there shoulder to shoulder with somebody like Paul, who says, here's the motivation, here's the company point of view. And then if MakeYouSafe can say, we're a small company with great hopes, and you're all fortunate enough to work for an organization like Paul's that is really taking these steps to keep you safe. That's does a very good job of getting workers started on the right foot. If we can encourage them along the way, hey, thanks for telling me about something you saw that was important. I'd love to have you do more of that. That might be one of the most important behaviors you reinforce. You get more of those reports. And then the software platform really has, with Stephen's help over years, with listening to lots of safety professionals in the field like Paul about how they want to use data, we have made our platform so easy to understand that you don't have to have a room full of data scientists, right? It's immediately actionable. It's geared toward the safety professional. And that's really our intent, is to make people, better at their jobs and make it easier for them to do good work. So, yeah. You guys, would you add anything?
I would just add that I would agree with that. I would say that the platform is relatively easy to use. It doesn't take there's not a huge learning curve, but if you do have a room full of data scientists, they can get at that really granular data and they can pull it out and they get very excited about it as well. So it kind of covers the entire spectrum depending on really how techy or granular you want to get with the data. Mm-hmm. But you don't have to if you don't want to. You can still get lots of really good insights out of it.
Yeah. Paul, any comment, thoughts?
I can't make that any better than you did. You guys did great.
Okay. I mean, we work with some multinational organizations, right, that do have room full of data scientists. And then we have, the ABC Manufacturing Company, which is really a safety team of one. And I've given presentations at our users conference with the title, if you've only got 15 minutes to spend a week, let me show you how to use it. So we're trying to make it as easy to use as possible. Great question. Got any others?
Awesome. Yeah. What kind of infrastructure requirements are needed to make this work? We've got some folks asking if this would be suitable for an on-site in a construction.
Yeah, really good question. So we started really with a focus on fixed workplaces, right? That's the biggest part of the workforce. So workers who go to a facility, you probably see base stations hanging on the wall behind me here. They need a power outlet and they need to connect to the internet somehow, either wired or wirelessly. And then data from this wearable is sent via a Wi-Fi network back to that kiosk and then goes to the cloud analytics platform. But we're making great strides. We just announced remote worker capability. So now this wearable device can be paired with a mobile device for workers in the field outside of a facility. And we're even working on not relying upon a Wi-Fi network to send data. So there's a lot more in store. But specific to that example or that question about construction sites, for the two guys who get in a pickup truck and go out and work on a roof, and then, tomorrow they go to a different roof, we may not be suitable for them just yet. But for a fixed construction site, we've even gotten started without real-time data, right? With no infrastructure. We just have the workers check out a device. There's memory on the device. At the end of the day, they return it and then it gets uploaded. So we've done a variety of things for all kinds of customers, but having access to what previously was unavailable enables them to do all the things we're talking about.
It's very exciting. More fun things to come, I see.
Absolutely. Any others?
Yes, we had a couple questions asking about accuracy, especially as it pertained to the motion sensitivity, if there were ever any kind of false reports or false identifies as a slip, trip, or a fall.
Yeah, good question. So our philosophy is really to err on the side of over-reporting as opposed to not detecting something that was important. So we're pretty accurate, 90% accurate on slips and trips and falls. Other things we may not be able to classify, but we still provide data on so that they can be acted upon. On rare occasion, we'll say something looked like a slip to us or maybe was repetitive. And when a safety leader goes and talks to the worker to find out what was happening, because we care, help me understand what you're experiencing, the worker might say, it wasn't really a slip. In my opinion, it might have been a trip. And our platform, we allow the safety leader to, with a touch, reclassify something in the event that we got it wrong. And this isn't, a great use of the term, but over time, we begin to teach the platform to be a little bit smarter about how to recognize what's unique in your environment or unique in a job role. We're further training machine learning models to be more and more accurate over time. But you got to get started in order to be able to do that. So, yeah,
well, it's good to see that the technology isn't necessarily offering a replacement for that human to human interaction. There's still very much a need for that safety lead to go out and check with the folks to make sure that how they're doing and all that kind of additional information, which is nice.
That's a really well-placed phrase that I bet all three of us might have something to say about there, right? We're attempting to be a diagnostic tool, not to replace Paul as an effective safety leader, effective safety management team, or Stephen with a background in industrial hygiene or loss control, right? We're a tool that provides data that becomes actionable for them to further understand a problem or know where to focus. Guys, would you comment at all on that? Or
I'll just point at Paul and say, I hope it's helping him build his culture, because it gives him and his team a reason to have positive interactions with his workers.
Yeah, and I'll take it a step further. In addition to myself and my team, it's the on-site management, which is critical. You have to have that champion on site, and then infuse that into the leadership team. And there's something powerful about a leader coming to check on someone and say, hey, just making sure you're okay. Did you have an event, slip, trip, or fall? Anything you need help with? So I would say if you're just going to slap it on people's arms and walk away, don't do it. There has to be the human element. The human element is critical. I mean, every business is people driven. And if you lose that ability to have dialogue and coach and give feedback and give assistance, then it's not going to do anything. It's a predictor. That's what it is. It's a predictive technology that allows you to get ahead of a potential issue.
As long as you went that far, I'll even bring up kind of a pet thought of mine, which is psychological safety, right? If you go to a worker and say, I want to talk to you about how you're doing your job, the immediate perception is, oh, this isn't a safe conversation. I'm doing something wrong, right? This isn't going to be fun. But instead, if we're able to, arm safety leaders or frontline shift supervisors to engage with their workers and say, hey, we're doing this thing. The data shows something. Help me understand what it's showing so I can better understand how you do your job. Is there anything you need in order to keep something from happening? I think there's inherent psychological safety even without ever teaching frontline leaders why that's important. It just provides that. So, yeah, great question, Sierra. I think we're probably at about time. I know we've gone a little bit generous, and we thank you for that. Thanks to VPPA for enabling us to do this. And Paul and Stephen, as always, really appreciate your support and contributing to educating the membership here.
Thanks for the opportunity, Tom.
Thank you.
I want to thank you all for volunteering your time to speak with us today. I think this is a very exciting topic that's only going to get more exciting as it continues to progress. We really appreciate you sharing your expertise on this matter and multiple perspectives as well. And if any of our viewers liked what you saw today, we do host webinars just like this each month. In addition to our monthly labor summit, we'll also be partnering with the Board of Certified Safety Professionals for their Global Learning Summit in May. So we hope you'll join us for this wonderful new event. Registration is now open for our regional conferences, as well as the Safety Plus National Symposium in Washington, D.C. Tom will be joining us again this year, so we hope you will too. To register for any of our events, please visit vpppa.org/events. Thank you all, and I hope you have a wonderful, safe rest of your day.